Welcome to the Bariatric Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kristen Lloyd, mindset mentor, somatic coach, and transformational guide for those on the path to true healing. Whether you've had weight loss surgery or on GLP-1s or simply seeking a new way forward with food and your body, this space is for you. This podcast is a mission to change the narrative, unlearning the patterns that no longer serve you, moving beyond quick fixes into deep, embodied healing, lasting mindset shifts, and true self-leadership. We are healing from the roots, rewiring the mind, regulating the body, and returning home to ourselves. We are here for growth rooted in honesty and self-trust because that, my friends, is the foundation of healing. So grab your cup of joe or your H2O and let's go. Welcome back, everybody, to the Bariatric Mindset Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kristen Lloyd, and I am here joined once again. So excited with Coach Francis from the Bariatric Mindset Coaching Team. Thank you, Francis, for being with on today's episode, where we are going to be talking to and about the bariatric newbies and what we wish we knew from the start. I wish someone told me from the beginning.
Yeah, I'm excited about being here again with you and talking about this particular topic because we all started somewhere, right? We all had that newbie era. Either we were coming up to surgery or right after surgery. And there were a lot of things that I scoured the internet. I got on all the pages trying to find someone who was experiencing what I was experiencing or who had all the plethora of information that I was looking for. And I can't say that I found the magic spot necessarily initially. I think I found it since then, being here, but I did not initially find that. But there's a lot of questions I hope that we could answer for those that are new post-surgery.
Yeah. And one of the ones that we were discussing a little while ago as we were preparing is the idea that we'll never be able to eat the same, right? Which we know is a myth. It's a myth. I will never enjoy food the same way, or I'll never be able to eat quote unquote normal. I'm curious what your experience was with that, because I think that's what a lot of bariatric patients or people who are pre-op thinking about surgery have. It is very much a misnomer. And it is this myth that is put out there that you'll never be able to eat the same again, that you'll have tons of issues with food. And that's a very small percentage of the population who have food sensitivity or food issues.
Absolutely. I think that you are so right on that. I truly believe walking into this, even though I think the doctors and maybe the nutritionist, prior dietitian prior to surgery probably told me I'd be able to eat most things again. And I just didn't believe it because what I'd heard from so many people in the media, really, honestly, in the media is that once you're removing your stomach, therefore you're never going to be able to eat foods again. You're going to have issues with your teeth and nutrition absorption. You're going to be malnourished, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that possibly there were some complications early on with these surgeries, but this is a gold standard, right? These are gold standard surgeries that thousands and thousands of patients have had them and are living normal lives. If we can call any life normal, right? We're trying to put labels on it. But what I know for sure is that I walked into this thinking so much about good and bad foods, right? That I thought, okay, I'm never going to be able to eat a bad food ever again. And what has shifted for me so much is that I realize I can eat the rainbow. I can eat anything. There are certain things that maybe don't sit as well with me, but prior to surgery, I had things that didn't sit well with me. Right. I just wasn't in touch enough with my body to realize, oh my gosh, when you eat that much cheese or that much sugar or that much whatever, it's going to make you sick. So it really, for me, what it did was it brought me in tune to how food does affect my body and what I consume goodies and sugary things at times? Absolutely. But they're not the bulk of my diet these days or the way I eat these days because I have become so in tune with how I feel physically.
Yeah. And one of the things that I have shared is, and I remember my surgeon was a sleep patient himself, and he had said, you're going to be able to eat anything. It's what do you want to eat? I think that was like a huge shift for me. And what has showed up for me since surgery is, what am I choosing now? Prior to surgery, man, I could have had 2 Whoppers or something, and it didn't impact me, or so I thought, because I didn't have that internal connection with my body. I was using food to soothe. I was using food to numb, using to avoid. Food was the pleasure center of my life. It was all of that. So after, if I had foods that were high in fat, we talk about dumping. A lot of times people will talk about dumping sugar. I remember the first time I had ice cream, it was a very small amount, half cup, the little itty bitty individual size. I couldn't finish it. And I did get what you may call dumping, or too much sugar in my system. And I don't have that now. There are some people who say, oh, I wish that I could have that. And we know that the restriction and the surgery is not to prevent you from eating pork. It's to help support you in making positive behavioral changes and make better choices with food and things like that. But personally, I notice now, it's almost the surgery gave me more bodily insight. Not alone. I had to partner with that process to say, oh, what am I noticing? And part of that honestly came from fear, because I was so afraid, like many people are, am I gonna stretch it? Am I gonna break it? Which we know you cannot stretch it. It's not possible.
It's not possible. You cannot do that. Correct.
Yeah, it's going to stretch to some small extent, and that's it, right?
So you can't break it. You can't bruise it. You can't ruin it. It's always going to be a tool. Once you have surgery, it will always be a tool, whether you find ways to eat past it, because you can do that as well. Highly palatable slider foods, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that you're right on with it. It gave you the space to learn about yourself. And that, again, this is a self-discovery, right? You have surgery. Yeah. What do I wish I'd known? I shared in the past podcast about, I feel like I had known myself pretty good prior to coming into this surgery. Boy, I woke up real fast because I learned some things quickly about how food reacted to my body.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is what I wish I knew. Just thinking with that last part about what I found out was that the food that I had prior wasn't registering, and that I would. So I guess I'm saying I wish I knew that, or would love to tell someone else, slow down. And you have the opportunity to really tune in to what's showing up in your body when you're, again, not as judgment, not as criticism, but just noticing, how is this food impacting my body? I never had that before. And also it never crossed my mind that was a thing. I just wanted the urges and the cravings and the voracity, the intense hunger to go away. And what I wish I knew, another thing, was the physical hunger will dissipate, but the mental hunger won't. Unless you...
Absolutely. And that's what you write about in both of your books. You've written about, you are continuously in your Bariatric Mindset Facebook page. You talk a lot about that this is not about the food. It's about the feeling and the emotions that we have around the food. And the other thing that I thought I wish I had known is that food was not punishment. And I really believed that every time I ate, it was going to make me gain weight. It was punishment for whatever. Or on the other side of it, that it was a reward for doing X, Y, and Z. So I used food both for punishment and reward. And once I had surgery, I had to pivot real fast. For me, and think about, because I was going to react and respond to life regardless if I had food or not. So I realized I better start working on some of these deep issues, or else I was going to start taking prisoners. And I chuckle at that. At the time, I had some teenage kids and a husband, and I still have kids and a husband, but that it had to go somewhere. And that's where, and this can be another episode that we talk about transfer addiction, because those feelings had to go somewhere. And for me, I was blessed and I was lucky that I stumbled upon your program really. And a year and a half or so later, when those feelings were getting so big, you ride the wave for a minute, that right after we call it the honeymoon stage. And then the real work starts. And that's where, for me, I found you and found your books and found the community that you've created, which is Bariatric Mindset. So
I think the punishment reward process is so weaved into diet culture and diet mentality, where that whole process of I've had a really hard day or I've been good today, and so I deserve X, Y, and Z. So food is reward. And then also your body, that fight with your body, call it attempting to get your body to submit, or that control pattern of body, you're not losing weight, so I'm not giving you X or I'm not giving you Y, where people will restrict. And that's where we see a lot of disordered eating patterns. Even if someone doesn't have a clinical eating disorder, they're disordered eating patterns that are, again, embedded in diet culture, where it's food becomes reward and punishment. And I didn't know that either. And I wish I knew. There was so much that I didn't know that I wish that I knew. The other one is this whole idea of perfection, and that if you do have a cookie or a brownie or who knows what, a slice of cake, I've ruined it, which I think plays into that, but it is also somewhat separate. This isn't a diet. I think that's the other thing, is this is not a diet. And if you treat it like a diet, it will mess with your head, and you'll see the yo-yoing, because that's what happens a lot of times with diet.
Absolutely. And then I think that those folks that are listening to this podcast and are post-surgery, some years away, and they're living that diet thinking, the binge and then the restriction, the binge and the restriction, and they're finding that they're maybe maintaining some weight. They may not agree with exactly what's happening, but if you take a step back and look at really how to live this post-surgery lifestyle, it is a lifestyle, and it can be super rewarding, and it can be super, you can get out of it so much, because many of us did not have surgery to then just live our lives as post-bariatric surgery patients. We had surgery to get our lives back, to reclaim the things that we had lost, because for whatever reason we had put on weight and become, I don't know many people who had surgery who are not obese, clinically obese. So we fell into that obese category, and there are so many health things that happen during that. Most of us have surgery to get back, to reclaim our lives and reclaim being physically active to some extent, to reclaim going and being able to walk around town and enjoy things. We're actually recording this right around July 4th. And I thought you'd think about 8-10 years ago prior to surgery, what that looked like for me. That was hot. That was miserable. I would never want to be outside in those kinds of events. And now I don't think it is, but I don't think about not being able to get around because I'm not physically capable of doing that, because I have been able to lose the weight and maintain the weight loss. And that comes because I have come to terms and understand food is not punishment and food is not a reward. Food can be all things in my life. I can have good food and I can have treats, and I can eat one way one day and eat another way another day. And that's more, I think, if you think of normal, which again, what is normal, right? I think that I've had more thinking in that normal range about food today.
And I think on that, I want to go just a tad bit deeper, because some of the cravings and the urges, and I've said this before in a lot of different places, so maybe not in other podcast episodes, but when it comes to food, a lot of times, this was very much me before surgery. So I wish someone had said this to Kristen, right? Kristen, your hunger, your yearning for these foods, right? They're nurturing, or whatever, your taste buds, right? They are your hunger for pleasure in your life, for fulfillment, for validation, for emotional reinforcement, to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. And yes, did I have love in my life? Yes, I did, prior to surgery. What I didn't realize was how much of my power I had turned over to food. And I originally thought I was a food addict. I'm not. I don't see myself as a food addict. I see myself more as a recovering emotional eater. And so I want to say to people who are newbies, what I wish I knew before was that and you won't know this, I think, until after, but at the time, what you may not know is it's that the self-discovery process of, okay, who am I now? Which the identity piece is a whole other ball of wax. But what I'm saying is, who am I with my relationship with food, and very specifically food as a tool to cope, but making food, it was responsible almost for what had a day.
Yes.
And that, I think, is if I don't have a quote unquote delicious dinner or fantastic lunch, it's not going to make or break my day anymore.
Sure.
That, I think, is something that not everybody's necessarily going through that, but when I think of the people that we work with, the people that I see that are connected and almost attached or dependent on foods, it's because it's more than just fueling their bodies. It's more than just nourishing them to get the energy that they need. It's doing something else. And have we looked at what that is? Because it's going to be different things for different people. And what I wish I knew was, Kristen, you're using food in other ways than for nourishment. So all the times people are wanting to go through, what are you eating? What are you eating? Your food log. And there was so much shame, again, diet culture, but it's also, what are you hungry for? Nobody ever really asked me that question. What are you hungry for? And I don't know, maybe I dismissed it or I was aggravated by them asking me that. If we're able to be present to look at that, what can we learn and what can newbies look at that it goes beyond just the weight?
And it is. And that's a super deep question. What are we hungry for? And there are many people walk into this surgery at, I have a problem and I'm going to fix it. So we have surgery. Okay. All right, chef. And then they discover, wow, that problem was not just fixable by surgery. It had to be fixable by habit change and by my thinking about food and how I'm using food. What are we hungry for? We're hungry for love. We're hungry for community. We're hungry for joy. We're hungry for peace. We're hungry for, I'm using all of these words, companionship. We are hungry for, sometimes it's just rest. I just want to rest. Hungry for happiness. And when we find ourselves asking ourselves that question, really being able to answer it, that's the core for so many of us to then discover, okay, this is what I'm hungry for. Now let me go find it, and let me not find it at McDonald's. Let me go find it. Let me go find it in my relationships. And that's, we talk about food addiction. And you mentioned that you thought you were a food addict when you came in. And I do have some experience with addiction prior to having surgery. And I agree. I had addictive behaviors when it came to food. I had behaviors that made me want to hide my feelings and hide the way that I was reacting or responding to situations. And that's a lot of times what addicts do. Addiction is an extremely complex problem. And I'm not a doctor. I don't know all of the ins and outs of it, but I do know for me, one of the really helpful parts for those that are in long-term recovery, whether it be from alcohol or drugs or from eating, is community. Finding a community that you feel at home with, that you feel connected to. And that's what you've created in your platform, but it's also what other groups have created too. It's not just you, but that's
right.
If as a newbie, what if I could say another thing, wish I had known, hey, find your winners, find the people that are successful after bariatric surgery and pull your seat up and hop on the ride and listen to what they are doing and how they're finding success. That's why when I found you, Kristen, I immediately knew she's a winner. She's had success. She's had long-term success, and she's also had regain. And she's also experienced loss and grief and all of those things. And it's life, right? Life isn't going to stop lifing at us. And I'm in the middle of, if you've listened to any of our podcasts before, I've mentioned the menopause. I'm in the middle of it. So along with that natural fluctuation of my body has come some regain. But I also find that it's just part of life. So those are the things I feel like.
Yeah.
If I had known as a new patient or just walking into that's my thought.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people are afraid of regain before they even have it.
Nope.
To just say, pace yourself. It's not whether you will or you won't. And I think it's like putting the cart before the horse, right? So let's just focus on the loss. However, what I wish I knew is that the loss is easy. People may say it's not, but where I'm going is the maintenance. So the other thing, and I am gonna call out like the entire community, because what I think people are connected to is the before and after picture. But what they don't look at is, okay, your before and after may be taken within 2 years of surgery, but what's happened in 6 years down the line? What's happened in 10 years down the line? I think I've done another recording, and it's like it was said, it's not as sexy. And it's so true. But yet, do I want to be connected to the folks that lost it? I do think a lot of us are going to have some amount of regain. And there's a lot of judgment, which we'll talk about in another episode about regain, because people think, oh, it's all my fault. There's so many different reasons for regain that it could be hormonal. It could
Absolutely.
be changes in your body. It could be there are some people who have a baby. It could be PCOS, or it could be menopause or perimenopause, right? It could be andropause for guys, right? So it can be from a lot of different health conditions, lipedema, lymphedema, right? And other things. So we've got to look at, could it also be from mental health and severe depression and things like that? Absolutely. And so we've got to stop looking at the blame and shame and just, okay, what do I need now that I know this to grow from it? And again, we'll go deeper into another episode with that. What I wish I knew is that regain is not going to end me. Regain is not going to determine the longevity of my outcomes, but what will is my tenacity, my perseverance, because that's the other one. And I'll add this on, is there is no end. I wish I knew there is no end.
Yes.
And that's one thing that I tell people is, people think diets have ends, or once I get to goal, I'm done. No, friend, you're not done. You're not done until, and I hate to say, until you're 6 feet under. You're not done.
That's correct. That is correct. It does not end. It really, and I also when we were talking about these topics, I also said this is a process. It is a lifelong process. It is, and you can choose to think of it as drudgery. You can choose to think of it as just being absolutely, oh my gosh, I'm on this terror. Because I've talked with patients or clients that are just so angry at it. Or you can choose to think of it, this is my new lifestyle. This is the way I want to treat my body. There are many new studies and doctors that are talking about longevity, right? How you can live longer, live your life longer. And sitting there eating highly palatable processed foods is not the way you're living longer, right? Eating healthy, eating and moving your bodies, that's the way you're going to live longer. So if I had, again, you talk about back in the day when we had surgery, if someone had told me this is a lifelong journey, it's not a lifelong sentence. It's not you're never going to be able to eat food again. It's not it's not all the joy is going to be sucked out of life, because I put a lot of weight on the food with joy. Joy and food went hand in hand, like we talked about earlier. And so those are the things. Hey, if you're new to this, stick around, listen, pay attention.
Stick around and listen. Yeah. And I think with that, prior to surgery, I wasn't sedentary. I was sedentary and then I wasn't. And so the other thing I wish I knew was, and it is a choice, right? It is a choice that for me to be my most successful self, for me to really be successful with this surgery, I did know that movement, exercise, working out, whatever was going to be a part of it. And I wasn't averse to that. Averse to that. But what we see now, again, this is more diet culture. I don't see it so much in bariatrics, but I still see a lot of weight loss stuff in my feed, in social media, in a lot of places. I lost 40 pounds without stepping in a gym or without exercise. And I'm like, that is no flex. Because
I totally agree. That's right.
Because I don't want to be bulky. I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I want to have lean body mass. And I did not think about that. I just thought before surgery, my brain was like, get me skinny, make me thin, make me socially acceptable to society, because there was still so much of that diet brain. So what I wish I knew was, number one, that my diet brain was going to get flipped upside down, that I was in for it. And then that movement, because I even remember at the 3-month mark, my surgical center that I went to, they had personal trainers. Now, I had my surgery in Washington, in Seattle. I had moved to Georgia. And so we were doing televisits, right? This is back in 2013. So, whoa, they were ahead of the game. Yet, I remember the personal trainer telling me 3,000 or 10,000 steps a day, Kristen, is not going to do it for you anymore. You need to start strength training. And this was at 3 months because I'm like, why? Because I'd hit a stall. Why am I? He's like, because you need to start strength training. You need to start building some muscle and resistant training, strength training. And I remember being a little resistant to it. And then I was like, okay, I've got to do this. How am I going to do this? I didn't belong to a gym. I did it at home. I used resistance bands. That was like the very beginning. And so what I wish I knew was that these things that were suggested are not to punish me. Back to that whole concept. Movement is not punishment. Exercise is not punishment. And I've even reframed it. Movement is for mental health, but also movement is for longevity. The strength training, the resistance training is to protect your bones, to make your body stronger. It is not punishment. And when we shift our thinking around, this is a new way of life, that I wish I knew that it wasn't just weight loss. I wish I knew that it was a new lease on life, and that I would also go through discomfort. I wish someone told me this is going to be the most uncomfortable process you ever go through, and you're capable, you're resilient, it's possible for you. It's possible. And you may get pushed out of your comfort zone. And your inner toddler may be like, you may have some tantrums and you'll get through it.
Absolutely. And that is a great reminder for us all. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you've come here looking for some assistance, some clarity about what life is going to be like and maybe you are way post-surgery, but you can also relate to some of these continued questions of, is this going to be the rest of am I going to be thinking about this for the rest of my life? Yes, you will be thinking about this for the rest of your life. And you're also going to be living life to its fullest if you so choose. I love being able to work with Kristen and work with these folks that are willing to put themselves out there. But I also love my life and I love what I've created with it. And I love that my body can move in ways that it could not move prior to surgery. And even though I'm older and the aches and the pains are going to be what they are,
yeah,
I know that what I'm doing now is setting up the framework for the future. And I talk about that a lot in coaching is what do I do today is honoring my future self. And I'm not living in the past and I'm not living in the present, but I am living in today knowing that whatever is done today, my future self is going to benefit from. And I ask myself those questions when I'm in front of the buffet at the event for foods that are not necessarily the best at the time. I don't like to talk about good and bad because there is no good and bad. There's better choices. There's the best choices. And then there's other choices that are not so much.
I wish I didn't think about regain. At the time, it wasn't something that was talked about a lot when I had surgery. So I can't say I wish I knew not to be afraid of regain, but I think because so many people have a lot more information today than they did when I had surgery, I would say don't be afraid of it. It's more of being curious, but also it's a self-management or even self-mastery process. But there are things, again, we're not going to be able to control PCOS or lipid or menopause. Are you going to find resources to support you? Are you going to be able to work around that? Yes. The other thing, back to the grief around food, is we work with folks who have had chronic illness. So if you have something like celiac, you're going to have grief around releasing gluten, right? If you are a diabetic, and yes, some people have this surgery to reverse their diabetes, you still need to be conscientious about sugar, even if you have this surgery, even when you have this surgery, right? It's not a free pass to go and load up on sugar. It's still, so what I wish I knew also, or what I would tell to other people who are new, who may have more questions about this, is you are going to have grief. I remember having grief around food, and we see people having food funerals because they think they can't have the food. You will have grief in the sense that food will not, or unless you keep living the same way, like we said.
You can do that.
yeah, you will have grief around food because your relationship with food will change. But just like someone who has to do a low FODMAP or someone who has to release gluten, you're going to go through a grief process, right? If somebody has a chronic illness, you're going to have grief around whatever that is to give up. But when you have the potential to refocus your attention on what do I get? So again, we're very loss averse. This is
Yes,
like
we are. As humans, we don't like to be uncomfortable.
we don't like to be uncomfortable, but we focus on what we're losing and unintentionally increase suffering and pain because we're focused on what we're losing instead of what am I getting? Right? What am I getting? And we can't see that immediately. So it's very human to focus on the loss. I can't have this or I shouldn't or blah, blah, blah. And if as someone, what I wish I knew is that what you're going to get from this, again, not just weight loss, what you're going to get from living this life is so much more than what you think you're going to lose. What you have the potential to gain and receive and the impact and the fulfillment and the joy that you have the potential to receive from the surgery or from the weight loss process. It could be that you're on GLP-1s. It could be that you're on both, whatever. Your potential to live your life to the fullest, this is an open door to that. And that is what I didn't realize. I thought that I would get that from being in a smaller size, and it wasn't the weight loss. It was changing the relationship with food that created this open door towards the healing, but also living differently. And when you focus too much on giving something up, you're unintentionally increasing the suffering. So every single time, this is a great tool just to like share, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Every time you're focused on, oh, I can't have this or I shouldn't, or reframe your thinking to not what am I losing? Because it's primal. It's part of our fear response. It's very protective. Nurture that part of you that's afraid of giving. Nobody's telling you to give it up. We do need to change our relationship with food. But when you look at how attached you are to whatever that is, the food, the coping, the behaviors, you're focused on loss, right? And there may be grief. Go grieve. Allow yourself to grieve. However, what I would love for people to know is that you also have the capacity, the potential to be unintentionally increasing your suffering with that attachment. And when you can say, can I see this from another perspective? How can I see this differently? How can I see this situation through a different mindset, through a different lens? How can I see this as the door to freedom instead of the door to restriction?
And it's a great note to wrap up on, because I truly believe that if we can shift the way we think about restriction and think about the way we use food, then we can get really far. And asking that question again, what are you feeding?
What are you feeding? What are you feeding? Yeah. All right, everybody. That's a wrap. We're going to close out here. I'm sure that we could continue with this for another 10 hours.
I'm sure we could.
We're going to wrap this up. And thank you again, Frances, for being with me here today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Once again, if you are looking to connect, you can find us at www.bariatricmindsetsuccess.com. Check out all of the freebies that we have to offer. Join our Facebook group, Bariatric Mindset Mavens, and we'll see you in the next episode. Lots of love. Bye.